Everyone, what's up? It's me, lo-fi musician and producer, Blue Sirens. And this is where I hang out on the internet and I talk about anything related to music. It can be anime, comic books, gear, whatever it is, you can find it here. Today, I want to talk to you about the idea that albums maybe don't matter anymore. Or maybe they do. But before we dive into that, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So, it was recently asked online on Threads, do albums really matter anymore? I mean, it depends on the genre, I think, but I think in the past year or so, we saw through the Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef that singles was where it's at, because single and single after single was dropped and nobody released an album. And even Kendrick Lamar said when he released the album post the beef, he said, I didn't put my hit single on it because of the integrity of the album and the integrity he has himself, not to make that album sell out just because a hit single was on it. Do albums even matter anymore? I mean, his album definitely blew up and did great numbers, and Drake, prior to all this, definitely had a lot of streams off of all his albums collectively, and not necessarily per single, but singles definitely played a hand in promoting that album or all his albums. So I think it really just depends, and it really just depends on the artist themselves, because a single or just a standalone song may be all you want to release. It may be everything that you need to say in that one song, and there's nothing else that needs to support it. But that also means that we're looking at albums through the filter of maybe a concept. Oftentimes, some of the best albums are just a collection of songs that work well together or sound good together. There's not an overall concept of, well, this song ties into this and this one and this one. It's not always done that way. And bands often just write songs in general. And then when it's time to release an album, they have 20 songs to pick from, and they just pick 10 or 12 that they think sound good together or work well as a collective. It's not as common as we may think for artists to have an overarching concept for an entire album. And if it is, that's often a more difficult thing to accomplish, especially if you're starting it within 30 days and need to finish it within 30 days. Because to walk into a studio and say, we're going to record this from start to finish and be able to turn out all those ideas, and hopefully they don't sound similar or be close enough together, is pretty tough. You're going to be constrained by the building, the people you're with, and you're not going to be experiencing different things to be able to add variety to it. It's very easy to get stuck doing the same thing over and over when you don't have a variety of experiences to pull from, or a variety of influences on top of that. And you probably want to get feedback on all the stuff that you're making, and if you haven't got anything different or variation wise differently to say, well, what about this or about that, pretty easy to say a lot of it's going to sound exactly the same. So concept albums, I think, are just a little bit harder for people to come across, especially if they're coming from just recording in 30-day periods. And I think in general, artists are always creating. We're always trying to make a song. I'm working on like 4 or 5 different songs at the moment, and it's tough for me to say, do they all sound the same? I hope they don't all sound the same. I know they don't all sound the same, but there might be some similarities where you could see that it's from the same artist, which isn't a bad thing, but maybe a similarity where like, oh, this chord progression maybe sounds a little bit like this one, or the drum beat sounds a little bit like this one. So being able to have variation in your music is super important, very hard to do in concept albums. And when we come together to make an album, it could just be of a collection of songs that we've had. It's tough to sit down and say, I'm gonna make an album right here, right now, and have it done in 3 or 4 months. It's a much easier idea to approach an album by just saying, let's just write a whole bunch of songs, and then we can pick them out and see what goes from there. And I think before streaming, that's what artists pretty much did. They just said, we're always gonna be writing songs, and then when it's time for us to release an album and promote it and go on tour and all that stuff, we'll have stuff in our pocket we can take out, and we can collaborate with each other and finesse and do things in the studio that we couldn't do when we're just playing as a band or as an individual, and we'll see what happens. So albums just kind of have a different take on them now, I think, because it's so easy to just release a song and write one song. If your message is just in one song, you can just release it. If you have a larger message with lots of different stories that you want to tell, a concept album can help tell those things a little bit more. But we're not really always there for concept albums. And I don't think a lot of artists are actively trying to do concept albums. I think they know that their meat and bones is going to come from an album that they can get behind and tour. It's a lot harder to just do one song and say, I'm going to tour behind this one song. Now, if you're like Kendrick Lamar or a major artist that has a really big pull, or the song is just super popular, you might be able to do a handful of shows and get some really good turnout for that and be able to make some money from that and really, spotlight the message of that song even more. But to say, hey, I'm going to go on tour for 3 months on one song, I hope people come and see you, and that'd be great if they do, especially because you only had to do one song for a whole bunch of people to see you. If you're got a large catalog, people might just be excited to see you because they typically don't get to see you all year round, or maybe you're going to smaller cities to kind of promote this tour. But if it's just off one song, it might be kind of tough to do a whole country tour. So an album makes a lot more sense, and it also just creates the set list for you as a performing artist, because you know where audiences at least expect. You're going to probably do 6 to 8 songs on a 10-song album, and then you're going to do about 4 to 10 of your older songs, just depending on how big your catalog is. So albums definitely a lot easier to tour behind, but when it comes to streaming and creating and releasing, singles can kind of just capture that moment a little bit for you. And again, you can still capture those moments and just say, I now have 10 of them. Can I release it as an album? Do all these songs kind of like work together as a collective? Do they kind of have a pretty broad umbrella effect all together to say they work well? Kind of like you're just making a playlist of your own songs. Essentially, you have 20 of your own songs and you're trying to make a playlist of at least 10 or 12 maybe to say, do all these work well enough together that it's a playlist? That's all it really is. So I think albums do still matter, definitely when it comes to touring. When it comes to just releasing, creating, singles definitely still have, I think, our utmost attention. But major artists, it doesn't really make sense for them because they're going to go on tour to just say, let me release, 20 singles this year. If you're a smaller artist and you're trying to continually gain attention and have something always on people's minds, singles make a lot of sense. But you could also take those singles, and if you have 20 of them, make an album with 10, and then release that album of those 10 songs, and then you can sprinkle the other ones a little bit later on if you feel like the album energy is kind of dying down. But you have probably a solid 3 to 6 months as a smaller artist to continually promote that album if you're not playing shows. If you're playing shows, you can tour on an album for like 3 years and still get people to come if the album's great. That's the key to all of this. Your music just has to be good. But even if you're just posting stuff online or telling people about the music you have, continuously highlight the album and what you've learned from it, the message behind it, and I bet it's going to do pretty well over those 3 years. And of course, during those 3 years, you're going to be continually writing music, creating more songs, and playlisting your own songs to decide, does this work for another album, or does it go on my list of singles that I could just potentially release? So the bottom line to all this is just keep creating music. And as you create the music, you'll understand, is this going to work well as a single? Is this going to work in a collection of songs, also known as an album? Or does this single have more to it? Does this song have more to it to where I could create a collection of songs around it and create a concept album? Whatever it is, it really just depends on what works best for you. Don't be afraid to just do what you think is best and forget about chasing a trend or the algorithm, because that's not gonna leave you with a rewarding feeling, but people enjoying your music will. And people are gonna enjoy your music the most when you're the most genuine about that message. So that's just what I think, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you think singles are more important than albums, or if albums still matter, let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Peace. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you've learned something new about it or have joined in on the discussion. But either way, I just want to let you know that I have a new song called Vintage coming out on April 1st. In the description below, you can find a link to pre-save that song. So I hope you pre-save it and enjoy it when it comes out. Peace.